So we continue with our program. Our next speaker was rated by some of you as a supreme Scrum trainer because some of you took part at the Scrum trainings that we already organized. He already been here in Novi Sad, and he's going to come again on the 21st of June, and we're going to have a next Scrum training session. We still have few available seats for that, and if you find his lecture compelling and want to learn more, please let us know. Ralph is one of the busiest people I have ever met. You should see his traveling schedule. It's really amazing. So we are very lucky to have him here today. And he will be talking about Agile Technologies, actually Scrum, and what it can do for your business. So, Ralph.
Okay. Thank you.
Floor is yours.
I'm already mic'd. Great. I just get upset quickly. Excellent. So here we go. I just grab a bottle of water. I can have a sip here and there. So one question, who about kind of your Scrum knowledge or knowledge of Agile in general? How would you rank yourself? Let's say 1 to 2, somewhere here in this area, 3 to 5, 5, 7, up to 10. So the scale is up to 10. So who thinks is kind of okay? So the talk which I'll be talking about is about Scrum a lot, but also about other aspects, which goes to what we have addressed a lot this morning about the minimum viable product, this idea about, finding out quickly feedback from the client, what is the right product, because you might also have an idea which doesn't prove to be viable in the market. And this podium discussion was excellent right now, because I started my own company last year, and I was trying to do my accounting on my own. And now I need an accountant who is bailing me out from the government because it turned out I didn't really pay anything. So that's also an interesting experience from my side. So a little bit about myself. So I started as a programmer quite a while ago in '97. And I discovered early on that it's not everything about the technology you're going to use. There's also the question, how do I make sure that I actually build the right product? And then I was looking for tools helping me in that way. And this was UML and the Unified Modeling Language and the Unified Process, which kind of looked reasonable and everything. And I think it's still a viable approach to, I think sometimes if I step forwards, I get a feedback loop. And then in the year 2000, I ran into extreme programming. The book from Kent Beck, Embrace Change, Extreme Programming, who knows that? This was for me really a seminal work. It turned the world, my belief system, more or less upside and down. And I was probably depressed for quite a couple of weeks until I realized, really, that makes sense. That's the way to go. And it's a good technology approach to develop software, which is also something I'll be talking about. And then in 2003, I added Scrum to it, which is the link to management. It's the link to business. It's really how you can integrate your customer to help you drive out the right product for doing that. So these are a couple of companies I've either have been working for or used there as a coach, worked there as a coach for some time. I did come around. So originally I'm from Germany. Then I toured through Europe a little bit. Was on the East Coast for a year, 8 years in the Bay Area, and now I'm living in Switzerland where I founded my company. And I'm also a trainer with Scrum.org for over 2 years now, where I work really closely with Ken Schwaber together, who is one of the inventors of Scrum. And now the way I see kind of how Agile can help you to do your business more successful. And for me, business is opportunities. And this was also mentioned again and again. You see an opportunity and you need to seize the opportunity. But then also every opportunity is therefore kind of a bunch of products or product ideas, but you never really know, is it the right product? Is this really the product the customer wants to use? Because in the end, this is what I like about Evernote. Sorry about this. Here we go. Because every product is basically a collection of features. Features the customer might be happy about, or features the customer doesn't like or doesn't even want to, or features which are disturbing his daily flow, the way he's going to work with the application, with the product. So essentially, every feature is a risk you take by implementing. Because it costs you money, it might annoy customers, or it might be the wrong product, the wrong feature. So we need to find a way how we can make sure that the features we are going to develop, the features we are bringing out to the customers are the right features, the features they are willing to pay for so that we make money as a company. Features that say this is a great product because it has these features, so we get advertising about it. Also something which was addressed this morning in the unconference. Therefore, we need to find a way how we can mitigate the risks once we start to develop our product. And therefore, we need some risk mitigation strategies. And one of them, again, this was brought up this morning, is feedback. We want to have feedback. We want to reach out to the clients and say, do you like that? How do you feel about it? Is this okay? Do you want to change? All of those aspects. And this reminds me about the post I see, the Customer Development Manifest. This is a great compilation of all those thoughts, basically, I'm also trying to speak about. Because we need to have this feedback from the client. If we make an assumption, we might be right, we might be horribly wrong in the long run. And this as feedback helps us to validate our assumptions, that they're correct. We might even learn from them, and we can kind of, improve on it as well. But the important thing as well is that the feedback and the validation, it has to be quick, because if it's quick, we can do it more often. And if we do it more often, we have more chances of adjusting and adapting. And that's something which is Scrum really addressing, because it has this, Scrum is an empirical process control framework, if you look at it this way, and it helps you, it has a feedback and built in to do all of this. But the other approach to think about it is for me like, who is doing that? Who is doing that on a daily basis with their work? And this is scientists, people are doing research. And the scientific method has this approach built in. We ask a question, essentially we have an idea about doing something. Then we do some research in this area. Has somebody else discovered this problem? Are there some solutions out there? Is this product already given? Do I reinvent the wheel? Could also be a problem. Then I make the idea, no, it's feasible, we should do it. We should actually go out and make that product. And then we test it with an experiment, we analyze the results, we publish the results, and then we retest. And this is where we have this loop, which gives us feedback. So we know how to do that. So this approach has been proven again and again in research. Another person who came up with the same idea a long, long time ago was Edward Deming, with his Deming circle. But he's saying basically we have a plan, we act on it, so we do it, we check what's happening, and then we react to that. And this is the philosophy behind the Toyota production system, which Deming basically really pushed when he went to Japan in the 50s. His approach about developing products and making sure it's the right idea and it's the right development process wasn't liked in Detroit, so he went to Toyota. And now I'm taking this approach and I say, let's use that in an agile context and saying, okay, how can we leverage that for software development? What's the analogy in that area? How can we push it? So we have a new product idea. So we gather data, we define our acceptance criteria. How can we prove that what we are going to set out actually fulfilled the expectations? Expectations in the way that the product performed correctly, also the expectation that the customers actually like what we did. Maybe we do a change and something happens, but we cannot really correlate that. That's an important aspect as well. Then we write a user story. A user story is a specific agile way to express a requirement. It's not just the system shall do X, Y, Z. It's I, as an administrator, I want some features so that I can have some business value. It gives you immediate perspective. Because the role tells you I'm an administrator. Maybe you have another as a super user or as a clerk. You see probably less on the screen if you work with the application. It's a really simple but powerful way to express requirements. Then we implement this requirement, this user story, in a test-driven fashion, which is again, before we actually go out to write the source code to have the functionality, we write source code to prove that once we have written the source code we're going to set out actually is performing correctly. It's a completely turning around of our approach, but again, this helps us to structure our thoughts better. It helps us to be, as we write the functionality, we are actually user of the functionality, so we come up with better APIs and all the aspects of highly cohesive and loosely coupled code suddenly happens. Once we have that, we validate and verify that everything is working right, then we deploy, we give it out to customers, or maybe some set of customers, some beta testers who are willing to try it out. And then we get some user acceptance test feedback, and then again the cycle repeats. And the important thing for a company coming out with a new business idea is about basically being fast in doing that. Speed is of essence. That's what I'm trying to say. It's really important to be able to repeat that cycle as fast as you can. Because the faster you can do that, the faster you can fail, the faster you can learn, the faster you will discover the right product, the right solution you have to do. Now, if I'm saying that speed is of essence, how does this development approach work? So what are we seeing here? That's the Waterford process. And what do we do there? We plan everything, we analyze everything, we design everything, we code everything, we test everything, we find all the errors, and then we ship it. Actually, no, between test and code there's like an implicit feedback built-in because we cannot ship a faulty product. The problem here is that our work is organized by activity and not by feature. What the cycle I described before is feature-based. We want to prove that a feature is correct. So that's not going to work for us. And one of the biggest problems we have with that approach as well is until the design phase is over, we have nothing but paper. Some people go so far, they call it dead tree artifacts. We need to find a way to turn this around and use a different approach to doing that. And again, this is where Agile really helps us. So again, Waterfall, here we have it just simplified, laid out, so we plan, analyze, we have all those steps. And now let's see how we can do it with Scrum. And Scrum basically is, what we have here is defined, is it's Waterfall, it's a defined, it means it's a linear approach. We do step by step, based on activity. Here, it's an empirical approach. And empirical basically only means we have feedback. We gather feedback and we don't ignore the feedback. We use the feedback and we get smarter by learning from it and basically applying what we have learned in the future. So we have feedback loops built into our process. So we make some initial plan, like a viability, like a master plan, and do that. Then we plan the first sprint and then we do all those activities in parallel. That's a big challenge. That's where most of the companies actually struggle because they say, I can't think about testing before I have something to test. Yeah, it's a change of mind, but you can do it. You can sit together as a developer, as a tester, with a business analyst and say, we are going to write this functionality. How can we prove it's working? What are the corner cases? What kind of data sets do we need? And once this has been discussed, I know as a developer what I'm going to implement. The tester knows how to make sure that once I'm done, the test is ready as well. And the important thing is that at every end of the sprint, I have a potential releasable increment. That means it's production quality. It's not like, well, it works on my machine, it's production quality, whatever my domain expects production quality to be. That means it's written, it's tested, it's documented, has release notes, whatever there's needed. And then I have my small product increment. And that can be one feature, can be a bunch of features, but I can give this out to a certain selection of clients and ask them for feedback. Ask them, hey, how do you like that? Is this right? And they say, well, yes, no. Often what I hear is like, well, now as I see it, I know that I don't want that. I want actually this. Great. You know, because one of those sprints in average right now is 2 weeks. That means in the worst case, I waste 2 weeks. And I go back and fix it. So if I work in a linear fashion like here, it's like 15 months or even longer sometimes. So I have some learning experience, which can be internal but also external. Maybe the market is changing, the competition is doing something and I can react to it. Then I plan my next sprint and I have my next product increment, the next sprint, the next product increment. And so on. And this is how I can gather feedback as I develop my product. It's a challenge. I have to be really on my game development technology-wise. I have to be able to write tests as I go. I have to have certain infrastructure elements in my development environment. But they are not rocket science. They are out there for over 10 years. Many, many companies are using them successfully. Up here in the defined approach, I have one delivery at the very end, and I cross my fingers and I hope, please let it be the right one. If it's not, I have a problem. I have a really big problem. And this is again the point where I say each one of those small product increments, how we call them, they can be more or less a minimum viable product. And this is a really important concept. So the minimum viable product is this product which is the least amount of functionality which makes sense to bundle together and give out to a client to gather feedback. The minimum viable product doesn't mean it's crappy code, crashes all the time and looks horrible. It can be a really neat, polished piece of functionality, but it has to work, it has to be perfect for the end user. It's sometimes hard to define what it actually is. And if I have now the idea about bringing out minimum viable products, giving those to clients, having them play around with those, gathering feedback to validate, am I on the right track? Is what I was assuming correct? Do people pay for that? Is this something they want to have? I have suddenly a completely different notion about, for me, when I'm a startup, what is important for me. Suddenly for me it's not that much important how much money I have. For me the question is, how long is my runway? That means when I'm a plane on here, I need to have a certain velocity at the very end to take off. If I don't have the right velocity, that's it, I don't take off. So the question is, how often can I repeat that loop until my time as a startup is over? Again, speed is of essence. It's not about how much money I have, it's how fast can I learn, how fast can I actually fail to turn it around. And every failure is a learning experience, I can become better. And this is an important concept because from studies we have done with Scrum.org, we know that about 35% of the features actually do change. It means whatever the client originally comes up or the idea we are wrong by 35% at least. So first of all, this activity-based approach by planning everything, analyzing everything, or doing all of this leads to the wrong software, it leads to a wrong architecture, it leads to monolithic systems, they are hard to maintain. All of those problems I will incur in the long run. And the next important thing what we have discovered is, and that's actually not from us, that's from the Danish group, is that this is of interest for us because we know that only 7% of the features are always used and 13% often. That means those 20%, that's what we need, that's what we have to find. And that's why we need to iterate, that's why we need to go out early and learn. Because 19% are sometimes used, 70% rarely, and about 45% never. That is waste. We implement something, 45%, which actually is not that important. We could have used that time to be quicker, to learn quicker, to discover those 20% and bring them out. And this goes back to what I had said before, is like, how often can I repeat that on my runway? How fast can I do? And I have been talking to people that their only thought process in that area is like, how fast can we actually make this circle? But for them it's pretty much 1 week where they can really turn around and learn. And now I would quickly correlate all of this a little bit towards Scrum. So I know a few of you know a lot of Scrum about right now, but Scrum is very simplistic, and Scrum is really only a simple empirical management framework which provides you a meaning to get feedback, transparency, how we call it. It has only 3 roles: the product owner who's responsible for the product, and it's one physical person. If I ask a question about the product, I ask the product owner and I get one answer. If I would have 3 product owners, I would get 3 different answers. Who do I please? Again, it's a simple rule we have. There's only one product owner who's responsible about
kind of making business decisions at the very end. You can talk to him, you can try to influence him, but he has the last say. Then we have the development team who's there to develop the product in an agile, fast way, high quality, because it has to be shippable, releasable at the end of a sprint. And then the Scrum Master who's there, it's also sometimes called an Agile coach, who's there to really help the company to apply Scrum correctly. Only 3 artifacts. We have the product backlog, which is just a different way of representing requirements. We don't have a thick requirements document with 1,000 pages, where 80%, 800 pages is must-have features, and 100 pages could have, and 100 pages should have. It's for us, we just say we have a priority list, and the element which is topmost is the most important feature to have right now. And down below is the next important, and so on. And if we run out of time, if we run out of money, what hasn't been completed was the least important. And it's a way to maximize value. And the product backlog can be changed at any time. There is no change request if you change a requirement. It's fluid. The only thing which cannot be changed is what is currently worked on within a sprint, which is the iteration in Scrum. Then we have the sprint backlog, which is the plan to deliver what was been selected from the product backlog within the sprint, and then finally the product increment, which comes out at the very end, which is, again, releasable. It's completely done. It's not just there, it works on my machine, or 80%, 85%. It's 100% or nothing. The events, we have a sprint planning at the beginning, we have the whole container, the event which contains the other ones, the sprint itself, which is at most 30 days. Right now it's about 2 weeks, I would say, on average. It's a good time to iterate. Then we have the daily Scrum, which is a daily meeting where the team gets together and say, hey, this was our plan, we are standing here right now. Well, are we on track, are we behind? What can we do to still get on track? It's like really ad hoc planning, just in time, as needed. 15 minutes at most. And then we have the sprint review where the increment is being shown to customers, to marketing, to whoever has interest. This is really where we want to get the hard questions about the product asked, where we want to get challenged. And once we get all those hard questions asked, they give us new ideas. And all those ideas then fly back into the product backlog, which gets adjusted, and we potentially develop them for the product. And then afterwards, the retrospective, which is a really important point, because the retrospective is about self-organizing. How can the development team, the whole Scrum team, essentially learn from themselves, say, well, this is something we did, this was great, or this was completely horrible. We need to change that. So this is a chance for them to really reflect how they work and how they can improve on that. Just as all of this a little bit more graphically laid out. So this is my sprint. At most 30 days, as an average 2 weeks right now. This is my product owner with the product backlog. So this is the most important feature, next one, the next one, as he sees it right now. And we can decide, well, a bunch of those, this could be a minimum viable product. Then the sprint planning meeting, where the team, the development team gets together, they come up with a sprint backlog. It's like a long to-do list. We need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this. Then they go into the sprint. They have the daily Scrum, which is 50 minutes, but every day. Like we don't do weekly or monthly status meetings, we do daily 15 minutes meetings, and that's what's important. Then we have the increment, which is working. We can give it out to clients, we can get feedback on that, that's important. We make a review where we show it kind of to the whole team is there, but also potential customers, beta testers, whatever is important for us. Then we go into the retrospective, and then basically where we adjust how can we improve our process, how we can get more effective as a team, how can we find out better which features are needed. All of this happens, and this is also the reason why the product owner, Scrum Master, everybody participates in that meeting. And then here the circle closes, and that is one sprint essentially. And each one of those sprints is a chance for us to push out a product and learn. Well, and we must not forget the Scrum Master, which is down there. And this is really important. This is where most companies fail. It has to be really done. To really make it clear what we mean with done, we say done, done, because one done is often not enough. So I have to be done at the end of the sprint. And some companies say, well, yeah, we have it implemented, but you're not really done with testing yet. We didn't get around to do that. that's a big problem, because how can you really validate what you have done is correct if it's not really tested? You might get out a buggy feature, and then the bug is really in the area of importance, so you don't get really viable, interesting feedback. And this approach has really a lot of significance in regards to certain aspects about transparency and how you can really maximize your return on investment and all of those things. So this is when I contrast kind of Agile versus Waterfall. So the visibility, at the beginning with my Waterford process, I know exactly what I'm doing because I'm just planning everything. I write everything into my document. And then I send them off to develop it. And at the end, when I start to integrate and everything, and it starts not to work, and I have all those problems, again, I know a lot about it. I compared a little bit with a submarine I sent off to Japan, and I hope after 9 months it surfaces somewhere in the vicinity where I want it to be. So if I start working iterations, it's more like this. So every of those small waves is one iteration. I know exactly what to do at the beginning, then I have the development phase, and at the end, going through the review, having this inspection about my product, gathering the feedback, gives me visibility again, but I really never lose sight of where I am. This transparency is huge. I've been working with one consultant. He was with Accenture for many years. He founded his own company. He is my product owner, one of the big products right now. And for the first 10 sprints, there was not one sprint when he didn't come to me and say, Ralph, this is awesome. I know all the time what's going on. I know all the time what's not working. I know everything. I never had that before. So Accenture works with the V model, which is, again, a linear defined process on a waterfall. Ability to change. Well, if I only write paper, everything I can change. It's easy. Because I just have to rip out a page and put a new one in. But the further I go down, at some point when I start to develop, it's really hard. And this is why we have this process of a change request, because we hate change in the waterfall process. We want to make it painful so people don't do it. We want to make it expensive so people don't do it. We say change is good. Change is, we have to be able to change. And there's a really nice quote from Mary Poppendieck when she's saying, a late change in requirements is a competitive advantage. We want to be able to use this advantage, to leverage it. So when we work Agile, we have a huge ability to change in the beginning. It drops a little bit, but eventually it flattens out, because this is our iterative approach, which allows us to be open for change at any given time. The next point, business value. Well, you have your paper here, and then you start to, at some point when you start to integrate and make all the final tests, yeah, you get everything at the very end, if at all. This is how you get your business value. But if you work with a product backlog where you can really change the elements in the order and everything, and take things out and replace them with other elements, you can turn this around. You can say, well, I make the elements which have the most return on investment, most importance first, and then make the next one, make the next one. At some point this curve actually flattens to a degree where you can say, does it still make sense to implement it? Let's say we have a feature where we assume this brings us 100,000 euros, but it costs 120,000 to implement. Probably not, but maybe it's a feature we have to have so people stay with us. Then it's still worthwhile to implement, but we can suddenly ask this question. We can look at every feature saying, does it make sense from an economical point of view? Risk. The risk elimination, if I work like waterfall, it's completely the opposite to the business value. Once I get my business value, my risk goes away because they come together. Basically, the one comes, the other one goes. But in the same way as I can maximize my business value, I can do the elements which have the highest architectural challenge. Let's say I have to have a throughput from 2 million per hour or something like that. I do this first. If I succeed, I know from the beginning, yes, we can do it. If we can't, I can decide, oh, let's cancel this project, let's wait 2 years and let's try it again. Again, it's a powerful tool. So there's a little bit of a conflict, business value generation and risk mitigation. Because, you know, one with the other, they don't really match, but this is again where the product owner is really important, because we expect this person to know enough about the domain, about all the challenges to come up with a reasonable order. And if something is not right with the order, okay, it's one sprint, we go back, we repeat it. So now we'll come up with a couple of metrics which I think are good practices in Agile. So one of the things we are able to do in this regard is what we call A/B or split testing. It means often we're not really sure, is it that feature? Well, we have one feature, but is it that implementation of the feature or is it that implementation of the feature? Well, because we have continuous delivery at hand, we implement both in a simple way, and then we segment our customer user base. The one half gets solution A, the other half gets solution B, and we get the feedback. The one which is the winner, we stick to, the other one we take out. But in order to be able to do that, we have to have continuous delivery based on continuous integration. Continuous integration is so important. So who of the people here in the room who are doing software development have continuous integration up and running? Okay, and who's doing software? Then we have a comparison. Okay, so about 50%, that's great. Continuous integration is not new, it's about 12, 13 years old now. Continuous customer feedback. There's this one way there's the sprint review is one mechanism where I really bring the physical people in, where I have face-to-face conversations with them. The other way is I can go out and instrument my code to gather data. It's easy if you host it because it's on your premises. There's no legal aspect to it. You can still do it. If sometimes you get a thick client installation and asks you occasionally upload your usage data, is it okay if you do it? That's why they do it, exactly for that reason. The next point is cohort analysis. We don't want to look at trends without context. If our usage base is going up and up and up, let's say by 5 or 10%, that's great, but if we don't know really why, we don't know we're doing the right thing. So we need to see everything in context. And again, if we push out features with every sprint or every third sprint, when we have a collection of good features, we can really say, okay, now we're bringing out those features, and now let's look out how our numbers are changing. And then we can learn, we pushed out that features, our number doubled. Great, let's stick to that. Can we still maximize that? Maybe we get another factor out of that. Maybe we do something and the numbers go down, oh, this was a bad thing. Let's try out to find out why. But first, maybe let's pull out the feature. Again, this goes on continuous delivery, continuous integration. This is probably one of the most important aspects in Agile software development. You have to be able to push a button and get your product out of the door. It's the same elements as with the sprint testing. And one of the things I'm really a big fan of is the so-called root cause analysis. So that's again something Toyota has been pioneering. So their idea is, if you have a problem, you ask why 5 times. The first 4 answers to your why are only symptoms. The 5th answer is actually your root cause. Everything else, what you would fix beforehand, would be fixing a symptom. So whenever you encounter a big problem, let's say in your automation, in your continuous integration, in whatever aspect you have, just don't go in here and fix it. Ask, why did this happen? Because of this. Okay, why did this happen? Because of this. And do that. Do that with your whole team. Get everybody together and say, we had this problem. Now let's make a root cause analysis. It takes time. It might not look really efficient to use your developers for doing things like that. But again, what we have heard before, these are smart people that come up with ideas. We fix them, we will be better from then on. So this root cause analysis, this is something we can really do in our product review at the end of the sprint when we inspect the increment. In the retrospective, when the team reflects on themselves, how did we work? How can we change our approach to developing software? And again, continuous improvement, this Kaizen thinking, how the TPS is calling it in general. And I think this is a specific mindset we have to get into, just not saying, hey, this is what we have been doing for the last 10 years, so that's good, let's not change it. No, always assume what we are doing is not good. We can always improve. If it's just a little bit, but a little bit and a little bit makes you a lot better in the long run. And the last important thing is, and this is kind of what I basically started off in the beginning, is really work with small batches. If you do everything in one go, you get in this problem of what we often call analysis paralysis, because you just get overwhelmed with all the information you have at hand. You kind of really, you don't know where to start and where to end. It's just like you drown in all the information. Take a piece out of it. That's something, that's a chunk you can work with. Do it right, prove it that it was the right thing. And this is again, is based on continuous delivery, continuous integration. So here again, I'm repeating myself. Because if I want to essentially get to this one-piece workflow, I have one idea and I can implement it and I can push it out. There are certain software companies out there that have such a sophisticated delivery system. That means I, as a developer, I write a piece of code, I check it in, it compiles the whole application, it runs thousands of unit tests, it runs thousands of other tests. If all of those tests are successful, it makes a bundle and it pushes it out. It goes into production immediately. They are so sure about their approach. This is really the point where you want to get. Well, sure, you have to consider the other case. Are my clients actually willing to absorb so many releases? If you're in the life science field, well, always a software update means revalidation of your laboratory environment. That's expensive and time consuming. But if you're still able to do that, you can bundle your small increments and release them whenever it's most appropriate. But in order to work with small batches means you don't think by activity anymore, you think by feature. So if you take one feature and you make it complete, you have to have what we call a cross-functional team. It means you have to have all the skills to make this piece. It means you need a business analyst probably, you need a tester, you need a bunch of developers, you might need a technical writer, somebody from operations, and they work together. So you get away from having big companies with a database department and a UI department and a middle tier department. You have small cross-functional teams who really get their heads down and implement feature by feature. We find out what are the right small batches through our product backlog, which we can change ongoing. It's fluid, as I said before. And really important at the very end is our definition of done. Because we claim that we are done at the end of the sprint. So we write down and make it transparent to everybody within the company what the done actually means for us. And we take a big plotter and we plot it out and put it on the wall. And that's our guideline. Whenever I say I'm done with something, I have to be able to answer to yes to every of our points. If a customer comes and says we are done and what we show you complies to all of those points. That's a tough challenge again. This requires a lot of discipline from the development team. But this gives you the possibility to really incrementally build software because every increment is of top-notch quality and you can build on top of it. It's not that you have something halfway baked and you build and at some point everything collapses. The definition of done is again a really powerful agile idea about making sure that you can deliver software continuously in an incremental way. So what all of this means together, I try to visualize in this slide. It's many thumb pressures from my side, but let's just say we work in a defined waterfall environment. We have here our planning, analysis, design, coding, testing, and release. And if we work 100%, that's the time it takes. So now something happens halfway through design, really bad. What do you do as a company if something happens? You need to react. And how do you react? You start a project. But we don't have enough people to start a new project. So we have this great idea about this full-time equivalent thinking. We just say, well, you know, you work 50% on that project and 50% on that project. That works in an Excel sheet, but it doesn't work for human beings. That's also the reason because I cannot switch my mind that easily. Task switching is another waste. That's also the reason why we shouldn't use our cell phone while we're driving, because we just can't do it. But still somebody says, well, it's not another project and you work 50% on it, but statistics show it's actually only 40%. So forward going, we have 40% only. That means this planning phase, which we have here, is equivalent. So it takes more than twice the time suddenly. And then ongoing, it takes like this. We make a major release. Luckily, the development here then gets faster again, we catch up, and this is the next release. Okay? big batch, we get something out of the door once, and if we have to do it in parallel, it takes even longer. Let's just make the same thing again, but now we do it sequentially. We have somebody in the company saying, well, you know what, it's bad, but let's not panic right now, let's just finish our existing project, and let's then start the other one. So you make another major release and you push it out. And this is the difference. If you can work 100% on both projects, you are faster actually out of the door with either. It's a hard sell internally because you, in the first place you can, yeah, but you know, we started another project. Your plausible deniability is much, much better. But this is just for reference because this is interesting. So now we go here, again, here until this point we just produce paper. This is something which I think is really important to me. Now we work in iterations. So we make the first sprint, next sprint, next sprint, next sprint, something happens. So between every sprint, when we have this thin separation between, that's when we can shift left or right. Okay? We have the possibility to shift. So we shift. We say, let's take one other sprint to make a release, push it out of the door. We have a small point release. And the important thing is in Agile, because of our definition of done, we create the documentation as we go. We don't have documentation and we try to follow it, and then at the end, what is implemented and what is documented is completely out of sync. No, we do something and then we describe exactly how we have done it. Then it's accurate. We work for another couple of sprints on the next one, make a release here, and so on and so on. That means we are not faster in the big picture, but we are more responsive. We take more opportunities to react. And that's what Agile is all about, being able to turn when needed, to react when needed. But this is what, again, the point where I speak from point releases. These are still bigger releases. Actually, where we want to get to is to a point where we just say, let's think in features. We implement a feature, say it's good enough, we push it out, we work on the other feature, it's good enough, we push it out, and if then something happens, doesn't matter anymore. Because we have a workable product increment all the time, and if it seems right, we can push it up. We work on the next feature, we push it out, the next, the next, the next, the next, and so on. Now I get arthritis, and here I need to stop. And again, we don't get a time gain by doing this, but if you now think about this from the outside, we were really quick to change if something came up. We had the ability, the capability to listen to our customers, gather feedback, and react to it. And this is important as a company today because things are getting more and more complex. The lifetime of companies is shrinking by 5 years every 10 years right now. Because the world is getting more complex, everything is global, everything is interconnected, so we don't have a long planning horizon anymore. Therefore, I really advocate that we have to have a way to handle it this way. And all what I was talking about with Scrum and certain Agile development techniques or practices, this is what you need to have implemented in your company to be able to do that. But still, to get from this point to this point, it's nothing you do overnight. It's a long haul. You have to be committed to do it. But once you are there, you can innovate. So with that, I would like to conclude my talk and would be open to questions. I think I went over my time anyway. So are there questions? Yes?
Well, thank you very much. One question. Agile is about sprint. You take one sprint, take second sprint.
Yeah.
You maybe take third sprint, but you get tired. You need rest. Classical method like waterfall is some kind of long time run.
Okay.
But usually teams get tired. Having a milestone in every 2 weeks has a psychological pressure also.
Okay.
So is there any strategy about that? Do after a few sprints, do we need to take 1 week free or something like that?
Okay, that's a good point, and this is also something which is really important. We want to have sustainability. So let's take the waterfall approach. You know, you plan for 3 months. That's easy. You plan. You analyze for 3 months. Well, you have 3 months. You analyze as much as you can. So then you design for 3 months. You draw your lines and boxes and everything. Design is never late. When the time is right, the design is just right where it is right now. There's no stress until this point, and I think it's unhealthy, absolutely zero stress. And then you start to develop, and then a little bit stress comes up, and then at the end when you start to integrate, it goes up, and it goes up, and it goes up, and it goes up, and this is where people really go over the edge. I've been on those deathmatch projects where, you know, you work 100 hours a week for a couple of months. That's not fun. So what we say, we want to have a level which is a little bit higher from the beginning, but it's sustainable throughout. And for us, that means a 40-hour work week. Because if we apply a coding practice like pair programming, you cannot work more than 8 hours a day. Otherwise, your brain turns into porridge and you really can't think straight anymore. And what I have seen, for example, in one large company where we are in the second year about introducing Agile, you know, a release is normally a panic thing, you know, stressful. So the first release after 5 months of development, the whole team came in on a Saturday to deploy the release and to be there if something happens. So what actually happened is after half an hour, they all packed up their stuff and went home because everything worked like a charm. The next release, 4 months later, 2 guys came in. Because they said, well, we don't need the whole team. 2 guys came in, they made the release. They went home after half an hour. No stress. Because everything was a done increment they were building on. So, you know, the team, they have a higher stress throughout, but it's sustainable. It's nothing you burn out with. So, but again, you need to be aware about it. So you don't, so basically, this is a reason why the Scrum Master has to be there to protect the team, that they don't really get pushed too much from the business side. But if people suddenly know Scrum is not a good thing because it burns out people, then you do it wrong. The short answer. Okay? Are there other questions? Yeah?
How do you educate the business side in terms of how Scrum works, its strengths, its weaknesses, and the rules of engagement?
That's a very good question, and I don't have. It's very situational for me, context specific, like which domain am I in, what kind of people are sitting in front of me. If it's really high up management, I don't speak about iterations and Scrum. That's just confusing for them. But then it's like return on investment, total cost of ownership, lead time. You know, their language they use from the business side. And you just bring arguments why Agile, this thing Agile helps them to improve in those areas. If you go a little bit further down, like more like C-level management, you can explain about them. This is how we do it. These are the techniques, the practices we do. It's still, I mean, the point is like often we see bottom-up change, ask for Agile, but there's a hard ceiling. You can't get higher at some point unless you get support from top down. And this is the big challenge. But I think more and more companies are open for it because they see the need to change. Okay, are there further questions?
No.
No? Great, thank you very much.